Some call me a drifter, a passerby, like a comet careening through this life, affecting change on those around me for a moment, then moving on. Sure, there may be some that remember me fondly, my deep voice, calm demeanor, protective nature, all while in a moment where they need it the most. Perhaps it was the money that they needed, and it was given. Maybe there was a person, or some people, that were making life impossible for them, and I was there when it all just stopped. When the wind swept back into their lives, and it all became normal again. There are also those that might recall a shadow of a figure, but not a name or a face. Some force that blew into their lives as part of a storm, leaving change in its wake. Some destructive, some reconstructive. They may not remember my name or even my face, leaving them to constantly ask themselves if I ever even really existed. Then there are those that remember me as a nightmare, a hurricane, a ball of fury. For years to come, there are nights that they close their eyes and awake screaming in a cold sweat, flashes of my face, thunder of my voice, all in the storm in their minds that keep them up at night. Lastly, there are a few names written in a little ratty black book. The last thing that they saw was my face before their world went dark and cold. Pain and loneliness have been part of my life since I was a kid. I grew up in tranquil suburbia with white picket fences, manicured lawns, and neighborhood barbecues. These things all covered the darkness that existed inside the walls of my home. For when the doors closed, they shut out the light and laughter that my sister Sarah and I had. I hated those doors. They reminded me of why I lived in this nightmare. How it was my fault. When I came into this world, my mother did not survive. My father, Jack, had never forgiven me for it. Over the years, Jack slipped further and further into the darkness of depression. He sought relief in drugs and alcohol. Most nights, things resulted in tired sobs filling our house as Jack reminisced over the deceased love of his life and my mother, Diane. But there were the bad nights. Drug-fueled, depression-induced, hatred-filled nights. Nights that Jack came so close to killing me as he lashed out with every ounce of anger that he had. But my sister Sarah was always there to stop it, or to help mend the wounds. One night, one of those nights, Sarah had enough. It was the night after my 16th birthday when Sarah told me that she had a chance to run and she was taking it. Things were getting worse, much worse. Frank had switched up to harder drugs coming from some city on the coast. With the harder drugs, the beating had gotten worse. I remember the tears in her eyes as she tore away from my hug. I did not want her to go. She promised to write. She promised to come back. Once Sarah left, the intensity of the beatings matched the further slip into the darkness that Frank had. Almost a year to the day, on the night before I was to turn 17, Frank lost his mind. That night, and for many of the nights to follow, the beatings got worse and worse. I dealt with it the best that I could for 18 long months. Occasionally, letters or random text messages from Sarah kept me going. Somehow, I graduated high school, and I was preparing to leave for the military, wanting to get as far away from the hell that I had been living in. But things changed forever one night. There was a call from Kansas City. A man said that he had Sarah and wanted money for her to be returned. That if Frank did not pay, she would have to earn her money for him in other ways. I heard her cry my name over the speakerphone, screaming for me to come help. As the call ended, Frank's rage found focus. He unleashed it and came at me with all that he had left. But this time, things were different. Not tonight, not now. I had enough, and I needed to save Sarah. So, for once, I fought back. This only taunted Frank more. Frank pulled out a bat, but this was the moment where everything changed. As he stood there yelling and screaming about me how I killed my mother and it was likely my fault that Sarah had been turned into a whore, I felt something well up inside of me. I began to mourn. For the first time in my life, a hot fire burned. I could not tell if it was tears or anger, but there was something there. Deep from within, I let out a growl and lashed out, returning nearly 19 years of abuse onto my abuser. I no longer saw him as a father, but as a form of scum. When it was all over, breathless, I looked down upon his lifeless body and smiled. The court saw it as an act of self-defense. Out of the woodwork, members of the community let on that they had always known what was going on. Teachers, friends, coaches, girlfriends. To tell the truth, this hurt and angered me in ways that many may not ever be able to comprehend. Once the short trial was over and I was set free, my search began. Kansas City, where the call came from, then on to Omaha, Dallas, Vegas, Reno, Phoenix, and more. I have spent the last 7 years nipping at the heels of Sarah's shadow, following up leads, every single lead, hearing stories, good and bad, and carrying on the best that I could. Along the way, I have found some that needed help. I have learned so much and done so much. Some good, some not so good. But here I am. The freshest lead I have ever had has brought me to Los Santos. Sarah was seen recently. I need to find Sarah. I need to let her know that the nightmare is forever over. I'm sorry, I could go on and on, but it's time to move on. So remember, we're all wrecks, accidents. Forget the freak, we're all just nature. Keep the gun oiled and the temple cleaned. Shit, snort, and blaspheme. Let the heads cool and the engines run, because in the end, everything that I do is everything that I've already done. My name is Ezekiel Sheppard. Most call me Zeke, and this may be the final chapter in my story.